Hey, while this week you guys are working on the project in class at night, you are going to be watching these quick, simple videos covering chapter 22, 23, 24, and 25. On Moodle, uh, next to this link, you will see a link for the guided reading notes, which is just an outline of this chapter. Feel free to print those off, write anything down you want to, so you don't have to write down everything on each of these slides. That's all done for you already. So let's get going here looking at this. And World War One, the first main war, there was a lot of web of alliances that were all entangled and going every which direction. And it all started on June 28, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophia, were traveling to Sarajevo, the capital of Austria-Hungary, and their car was bombed. The bomb bounced off their hood. They were unharmed, but they continued to go on with their trip. Later on, Galvio Princip was waiting down the line, the parade route, and he shot and killed the royal couple. And this set off a huge chain reaction. Like I said, this big old web of alliances that were all over the place. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The terrorists that killed them were Serbian. Russia sided with Serbia and declared war on Austria-Hungary. And then Germany decided to get involved and declare war on Russia and France. And Britain then came to France's defense and declared war on Germany. So this whole big web of alliance that led from one country to another. If you bomb us, we bomb you, basically. And the United States is yet to get involved, and we are happy to stay neutral. And because this conflict seemed very distant to Americans. This was a whole other continent away, and we wanted nothing to do with it. And there was two main ideas. Nationalism was very important to the people of Europe, which was a very strong feeling of pride and loyalty to the nation or to an ethnic group. Or militarism, which was a policy of glorifying your military power and your values. And if you look here on page 284, along right here, you can see the Central Powers versus the Allied. And the United States will come into the Allied powers later in the war. But really, it's France, Britain, and Russia versus Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire, or which is known as Turkey today. And here is the map of that you can see. So you can see right down the middle of Europe is where the enemy was, and we had to take out that enemy. There was a lot of people that were very happy in the United States that were happy about our neutrality. George Washington wrote that it's evil to get entangled in other people's alliances. But however, in 1914, a third of the United States population were either foreign-born or they were children of foreign-born, so they had a lot of close emotional ties back to the mother country, back to wherever they came from, in Germany, in France, in Great Britain, Lithuania, wherever they were coming from, they had a lot of issues, a lot of close relatives with this war. And there were two main fronts: the Eastern Front, which Russia advanced into Germany and Austria-Hungary, and the Western Front, which we're going to mainly focus on. The German troops marched into Belgium and France, and by the end of 1914, the war on the Western Front had turned into basically a stalemate. And if you ever go into history in college, you'll have to read the book All Quiet on the Western Front. It's actually a very good book describing what life was like in the battles. While the fighting was happening in Europe, we were still sending supplies to Germany, Great Britain, Austria-Hungary, because we were creating so much product in the United States. And we wanted to stay neutral, but we were supplying them with food supplies, weapons, anything that we needed. And Britain did have a blockade against ships heading into Germany, and we really didn't take any action towards that, but later we would, because, if I move on to the next slide here, in 1915, Germany found a way to challenge both the British blockade via submarine attacks, and those U-boats, or Uttersboot, the undersea boat, and they definitely could start sinking passenger ships and cruise ships if they weren't removed first. And the U-boat did not have the capacity to warn the merchant ships without losing the element of surprise. So There's a lot of issues with this, and the Lusitania, which was sunk on May 7th, 1915, without warning and killed 128 Americans. This was a real first turning point that got the United States thinking we're going to have to get involved in this war at some point in time. After there were a few other smaller scale merchant ships that were attacked, Germany promised to spare all lives in future U-boat attacks as long as the U.S. forced Britain to end its illegal blockade, because we were sending supplies to Germany. They needed that to fight this war. We accepted the pledge, but not the condition. And back in the Spanish-American War, Teddy Roosevelt pointed out that the U.S. was very ill prepared for the war when it should, if it needed to fight. He did not approve of neutrality 10 years later, but he did advocate for one side initially. Wilson headed to begin to advocate building up the Navy. He also wanted to build up the Army as well. Propaganda. This is a very important part of the war that got people to buy into the war. This was basically the info or a rumor spread by a group of, or a government to garner support for their side. And both the Allied and the Central Powers launched huge propaganda campaigns. The United States and the Allies were by far the most successful in this alleged atrocities, and German soldiers were advertised. They would show how bad life was and that you need to enlist, you need to support the Allied troops. And the United States declares a war to end all wars. We were thinking this would be the last time we ever have to fight a war. And it really started with the Zimmerman note that stirs up a lot of anti-German sentiment. And this is when the German minister to Mexico, Arthur Zimmerman, wrote the U.S. should join the war, and Mexico and Germany should become allies, and Germany would help Mexico regain the lost territory in New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. Basically meaning, Mexico, you declare war against the United States, you fight the war there. It keeps the United States out of Europe even longer. Mexico flat out said no. And finally, the United States entered the war on April 2nd, 1917. Wilson told Congress that neutrality was no longer feasible, and on April 4th, 1917, the Senate voted 82-6, and the House voted 373 to 50. And this picture right here is propaganda. I want you for the U.S. Army, and this is the United States getting involved in a war in Europe. That is it for tonight. Make sure you finish up your homework tonight over this little vodcast. Check Moodle again for a survey that you need to fill out, and you'll be done. Have a good night.